All right, everyone. How are we doing today? Doing all right? Okay. I apologize for the delay in getting started here. Uh, there's some as I mentioned, there's an ongoing process in getting the AV setup in this room reconfigured. They were changing the computer systems that are available to you. The laptops are new, but they for haven't entirely gotten set up because they're also rerunning uh, cabling and things. The station here that I'm sitting at was ancient by university standards in terms of an audiovisual setup. They finally decided to get rid of it, but got obstructed in the middle of finishing that project. So we're working together. The thing that I forgot was going to happen was someone else who has a different combination of things that they sit down and put in here. Um, they couldn't see that screen. Okay. I have some broadcast control software, so it's easier for me to see what was up there. And I forgot that I was going to have to plug into theirs to be able to plug into the projector, which is also a temporary thing. Yesterday, I just plugged into the projector, and that's what I was fighting with. But I figured out what I was supposed to do. Um, anyway, so that's what I was up here fighting. For the person who replied in the chat, I'm doing okay. Just trying to get used to a bunch of new stuff this semester. New schedule, uh, different teaching circumstances, the moving from room to room and getting to fight with my computer system based on how it's going to react to different configurations of monitors and projectors that get plugged into it several times a week. It's always interesting. I never know what it's going to decide to not do, so we'll deal with it. Anyway, uh, but I don't mean to be down. It's just kind of we're going to lose a couple minutes every now and then because of some unforeseen nonsense related to technology. But I guess that's the way of the world, right? Okay, so um, the issue that we were dealing with last time was me not being able to connect to a computer service that hopefully today we won't have the same issues with. I know what was going wrong the last time. We will see if there's something new that we find that's going wrong. Anyway, one of the things that I did do is this is the Blackboard page for our class. And under the course materials section, I have made a link to some online course notes. Okay. If you open this up, this will give you access to notes. This page will be updated throughout the semester as we progress through the course and have more sections of things to talk about. Included in this page is a link to the getting started page, which is what I was referring to during Monday's lecture. Okay. Including some of the stuff and how to get into the on-demand service. Okay. Now, here's the moment of truth. I have the stream running. We click this link. Okay. We now go to this, and hey, there's the portal that wouldn't load last time. All right. So the idea here is that you type in your MyWSU credentials. Okay. Okay, the Remember Me link will work for like 10 hours, which is like the standard timeout for all the university login stuff. I'm not going to mess with clicking that button because I should hopefully only need to log in once. I don't know why you're not letting me log in. Okay, let's fix this. Okay, one of the 6 things that I use my MyDWSU ID to sign into, I guess, hadn't updated to the new password. Anyway, you log in with your MyDWSU credentials, you get taken to this page. If you are one of the student employees or something on campus that has to log in through Duo, you'll get a Duo hit, I think, on your phone. I recently logged in, so it let me do that. But this is the page. This is logged into the BioShock service. It'll show you your ID. One of the things that I need you to check is for everyone who wants to use this service to try to log into it, to make sure that your account exists. I submitted a list request for all the people that are enrolled in this class, and the account should exist. If they don't, then we'll sort it out. What I'll have you do is just submit a request to the people who manage the service, and then they should be able to create an account, but most of them should exist, especially because it's been a couple of extra days since when I originally filed the requests. Okay. 2 main things is there is a files link here that you can select. If you click this, it will take you to a home directory page. And mine had a bunch of folders that were populated already in here. Yours may or may not. I don't know. All right. But if you need to create a folder, you can do that so that you have, you can click here, new directory, and then make a folder to store information for your class. There's a MATLAB folder here, so base file path. In mine, at least, my recommendation is that you make a distinct folder to hold in all your information for this class, or for any other classes that you might find yourself using this service for, because you have it available to you. Okay. And then the other thing is, if we go back to that original tab, you will have an option to select interactive apps, one of which is MATLAB. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a different page. Okay. And these are not the default numbers that show up, but if you change the numbers in these entry forms, they'll remain. So I think it starts out as 112 or something. My recommendation for you all is that you do 4 hours, 4 cores, and 8 gigabytes of memory. Okay, that should be sufficient for your purposes in terms of starting a session. And what will happen is, if you click launch, it'll be a slight delay, but it will say that they're starting up your session. And this is a session on the university's high performance computing system. Okay, this has now popped up. All right, the session has been launched, and now there's a button available in order to launch MATLAB. Okay, this will open a new tab in your browser, and the first time that you log in, my window for MATLAB was minimized a little bit. You might have to maximize it like you would maximize a normal application window. But I also recommend that you go ahead and allow this to copy, to have access to the clipboard. So if you look up something on a different tab, you can copy and paste it into the virtual machine. Okay. So what's going on here is that this is a virtual desktop. Okay. You have logged into a virtual session on the high performance computing machine. Okay. It's called BioShock. This kind of is the collective term. All right. And this session inside of your browser window is distinct from what normally happens on your PC. Okay. So you have logged into a virtual machine. I don't know how familiar that is to you all, but it's a separate thing from your computer. So if you need to save something, there's a little bit of extra work to do, okay, which we'll talk about. But we have these things. You can now type in commands and do stuff in MATLAB. For instance, I can type the sign of pi, okay, and I get a number that is very, very close to 0. Okay. All right. Let's do some preference changes here because I know that font is too small. Where's the font? That's too big. I'm sorry, what? Okay. So in the question in the chat is, where's the link to what I got into here? If you go into Blackboard, there's a link to the online course notes. And if you look at the getting started page on the table of contents here, scroll down a little ways. The link that I clicked was the on-demand link in this section on that page of the notes. Oh, 1.1. Select section 1.1. Sorry, yeah. Table of contents 1.1 here. And then about a third of the way, a little bit close to halfway down this page is the on-demand link. Okay. Right, let's check the chat, see if there's any questions there. By the way, if there are questions in the chat, type them. I will make sure to periodically check over here to see how you're doing. Okay, so anyway, we're in MATLAB now. Okay, you should have access to this interface. You can type in and perform computations. All right. And what we will do, okay, in this table of contents page, underneath the getting started list, which is kind of an onboarding, making sure everyone can access the on-demand service, or MATLAB otherwise. If you want to use MATLAB otherwise, that's fine too. But there are going to be a couple of things that we have section to section as we get into the flow of the class, including hopefully getting these laptops working for those of you who haven't been bringing your own laptops. Okay. What we'll do is each day, or at least once a week, we will have a list of exercises. Okay. The exercises are intended to be short in-class activities that you complete so that I know that you know how to do kind of the basic syntax of what the goal is for today. Okay. And the other part here is homework, and that is a little bit longer and meant to be completed outside of class. Okay, using the basic exercise skills and expanding on those and dealing with more sophisticated questions. All right. So the mechanism that we are going to be using to deal with the exercises is going to be something called the diary. Okay. What MATLAB has available is a mode that will allow us to keep track of what we type into the console and what is displayed to the console. And what you can do is run a handful of commands. It will save the commands that you type in and the results that are displayed on the screen, and then you could submit that as a text file to me for showing the completion of the exercise. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So let's go over here to navigate to some place where we would like to save our information. I'll save it in the MATLAB folder. And if we type the command diary and then give it some name, the name that is suggested in the exercise page is exercise1.txt. Okay. This has now activated the diary, and you see over here on the left that a file has been created. Okay. This file will be updated until we tell MATLAB to stop saving stuff. Okay, the command that we would use to tell it to stop saving would be diary off. Okay, so what we can do is type a few things. We can type what I had typed previously, the sign of pi. We can tell it to compute 2 cubed. We can define some matrix, and then tell MATLAB to subtract some value from that matrix, and then type diary off. And if I go over here and double click this file to open it, we see that all the things that I typed in were saved. Okay, and this will be what you turn in to me for the exercises that are the actual questions. Okay, I was just making stuff up. All right, and then the first homework assignment will be completed in a similar way. You may just make a diary and type in the commands. Okay, if you happen to make a mistake and need to do something a couple of times in order to get it correct, the diary is just a text file, so you can open it and delete the bad tries if you want. Okay, don't submit to me something that's got 12 bad tries when you're trying to type in a command. Okay, I just need to know that you figured it out. Okay, what I mean is this is just a text file. I can delete stuff, right? Okay. Oh, and then another thing that you should know is that one of the recent changes that I have noticed to MATLAB, and I pointed out because this behavior is a little bit surprising, but MATLAB is pretty aggressive about autosaving when you're in there editing files and stuff. So just be careful about that. Okay, if you open a file and make changes to it and then close it, MATLAB saves. Okay, this is more of a problem if you're deleting stuff than if you're adding stuff, right? Because you might accidentally lose something that you didn't want to lose. So just be a little careful about that. Okay, so say we have gone through and done the exercise and want to turn in what we need to turn in. The place that we go is the home directory page that we were looking at earlier. Okay, that the tab that I opened the session in is the one that has these things, but if you click Files and Home Directory, it should open a new tab that has this interface. And if we go to here, we see that the file that I created, the exercise 1, now is available in this interface. And I can select download here in order to save this file locally on my computer. Okay, and it just puts it in the folder that you have where you download stuff for your web browser. From there, you can do whatever it is you need to do with it, namely upload it to Blackboard. Okay. Don't forget about this extra step. And then the thing to be especially careful about when you're using this kind of virtual machine style service is that whenever you log out, just closing the browser is not what you want to do. You want to make sure that you actually go through the trouble of logging out of the service. Okay. This is definitely what you want to make sure that you're doing anytime that you're using one of these portals. Okay. Sometimes virtual machines experience errors if they're not logged out of properly and you try to log in again later from the same computer or a different computer, it sees that you're trying to log in twice and will tell you no. And if you don't have a way to log out from the other thing, you either have to wait for the login to time out or contact someone who's an admin on the server to get them to kick you off. Don't do that to yourself. Okay, just make sure that you log out properly to avoid those potential problems. Okay. The other thing that you can do is on this page, which is the login page, is if you know you are finished after you close out of your sessions here, you can go ahead and delete your session so that you're not running on computer time that you don't need. Okay. So I'm not done yet, so I'm not going to click delete. I just wanted to say it while we were looking at it. Okay. It won't hurt anything if you forget to do this. Okay. It's an option if you know that you're finished working on it for the rest of the time period that you have reserved the machine for. Okay. So, questions? Seems okay? All right. Yes. Yes. If you type diary and then type in the same file name, okay, what it will do is it will reactivate the diary in that file name. Now you have to make sure that you have correctly typed in the file name, otherwise it'll make a new file. But now if I type some other command, oh wait, no, that's not what I want to do. I did it backwards. Okay. Now I haven't turned the diary off. That doesn't matter for the purposes of editing this, but you'll notice that those two, it tells you when you turn the diary off, but those last two commands, the last handful of commands I typed in are also present here. Okay. So if you work on it and get halfway finished and need to close the diary for whatever reason, you can type diary off, and then diary with the same file name will reopen the same file, and you will just append the new work that you type into the bottom of the old one. Okay. And if I were to type in some other new command, don't know if it gets added or not because I had the file open. It does. Okay. It didn't edit it in real time, but the diary is still keeping track of what I typed. So I closed this and reopened it, and the new command showed up that I typed in. Generally not a good practice to have the diary open and then also be editing the diary, just to avoid nonsense. Yes. Okay, so this is something that we need to test. All right. For those of you out on the internet, the question was, if you need to return on the diary, can you just type diary on and have that work? Okay. So if I type diary on and add a command, we'll do this because this is what I meant to talk about, but I hadn't talked about it yet. Okay. What this has done is it has appended the new command to the existing diary file that I had been using. Okay. Now, in order to demonstrate the thing that I was worried about and was questioning whether or not the answer was yes, if you have a brand new MATLAB session, and I'm not going to close and relaunch MATLAB to demonstrate this, but you can test it yourself. If you type diary on instead of diary and then a file name, MATLAB will just make up a file name. Okay, I think they just call it diary, and that will be, it will act like the diary, but it will be saved under a different file name. Okay, I didn't know if that was going to happen if I just typed diary on after having previously done the diary and given it a name that I had chosen. That was the question in my mind that I was testing. But if you turn it off, you don't have to type diary in the file name again. You can just type diary on if you're still in the same MATLAB session where the diary file was named. And presumably that means that if you do diary on and have file name 1 and then do diary off and then do diary file name 2 and do it and then do diary file off, diary on would point to diary of file name 2. So the most recent one.
You can always rename the diary.
Yeah, and if you would need to, the diary is just a normal computer file. If you want to rename it like you would rename any other file, that's perfectly okay. Just a text file. All right. So one of the things that I was kind of playing around with, an example that I was showing off, was, I'll go ahead and turn the diary off because we don't need it, was this. Okay. ATAN is the MATLAB command for the arctangent, or the tangent inverse function, however you want to think about it. Okay. And I have also demonstrated something else in MATLAB, which is there are some reserved variables in MATLAB. Okay, I type the word pi, I get something that is numerically the value of pi. Okay, or at least the computer's approximation of it. So one of the things that most people probably haven't been exposed to is the fact that you all have pi keys on your calculators, right? Okay. Did you know that your computer doesn't store the value for pi? You would think that it does, right? But it just computes it whenever it needs it. And what it computes is 4 times the arctangent of 1. Okay, which is why the difference between those two values is 0. Right? It's not some number close to 0, it's actually 0. Okay. Now, in MATLAB, there are some constants that are saved, some are not. All right. You should get a feeling for which things are built in so that you're using the appropriate values and can take advantage of the shorthands where they exist. Okay. There's not any reason for you to type in a bunch of decimal places for the value of pi, because you can just type in the word pi and MATLAB has that reserved as one of the values that's saved. Okay. Also, I and j, until they are assigned other values, are interpreted to be the imaginary unit. Okay, the square root of -1. All right. When I talk about I, instead of just calling it I will use the phrase imaginary unit so that it's not ambiguous what I mean. Okay. Now, this part is a little bit confusing because those of you who maybe have a little bit of prior programming experience know that I and j are among the most popular choices for indices, right? If you're indexing a loop or you're indexing some sort of vector structure, you would use I and j because that's just what we tend to use, right? Especially if you've taken linear algebra, one of the common things is that you would have the row index for a matrix as I and the column index of a matrix as j. Okay, so they kind of pop up everywhere. Now, that's okay, and MATLAB allows us to do this because we can decide to assign a value to the variable I, okay? And what this does is it overwrites the base behavior of that variable, okay? So if I is not assigned some other value, it uses the one that's built into MATLAB. But if I give it a particular value, it will be overwritten, okay? And it will remain overwritten until that variable is deleted, in which case it will refer back to the original value, okay? This also makes it possible for us to perform an act of Congress and get rid of all of those extra annoying decimal places on pi. We don't need those, right? Okay. There was actually a proposed piece of legislation at one point to change the value of pi to make it 3.14 because people can't handle transcendental numbers apparently. Anyway, but if we see the error of our ways, of course, we can clear this out and then return pi to most of its glory, right? Our computer systems only have 16 digits of accuracy. This is a limitation of floating point arithmetic, all right? Computers can only store so much information. They cannot store the infinitely long and infinitely complex pattern of decimal places that form the value for pi. So we do our best with 16 digits. Okay, there's a question? Yes? Okay. The answer to your question is a more deep discussion. I will answer in a second, but thank you for asking. That's a very good question for reasons that maybe you don't know all the details about, but I want to go through all the details. But okay, so let's check in with the chat, see if there's any questions about what we've done so far. Seems okay. All right. So let me switch over to the screen so that I can write. All right. And the question was, if I have something like I, and I have assigned it some non-standard value that's different from the one that's built into it, okay? Now, say I do something like assign a value for x by saying that I want to take this and do 3 times I, okay? Now, I know that because the value of I is equal to 2, that x is going to be set equal to the value of 6, okay? Now, the question is, if we clear I, what does x equal? Okay, now there are 2 ways to think about this question, and I want to demonstrate both of them. Okay, so we're back over here on the screen. So we set I equal to 2, then we set I equal to, or x equal to 3 times I and get 6. Okay, now we clear I. If I type x, I get 6. So if I define a variable that is dependent upon a particular value of a different variable, and that variable gets deleted, the value of the thing that I have assigned on that remains the same. Okay. If I reassign, it will use the new value for I. Okay. But it doesn't do that reassignment unless I tell it explicitly to do so. Okay. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Now, that's only the first half of my explanation. Okay. This actually gets into a deeper discussion about one of the fundamental ways that MATLAB works. which is pass by value versus pass by reference. Okay? Now, what we have seen over here is that when I defined the value for x, MATLAB looked up the value of I because the definition of x depended upon I. It found that value, and then it used that value in the computation that defined the variable x. Okay? And as we saw on the other screen, when I changed, the value of x remained the same. Right? What this means is that MATLAB behaved in a way that is pass by value. Okay? So the picture that I want to imagine in your head is that we need to think about addresses, okay, or files in a filing system, okay. So imagine when I have a variable I think of the variable as a folder, okay. Okay. The value that is stored in that variable is a piece of paper that goes inside the folder. All right. Now, whenever I perform some other kind of operation, all right, referring to that variable, they ask me for the folder, right? Okay. Now, there are two ways that I can give them the information that is in the folder. I can open the folder, take a copy of the piece of paper inside, and then hand them the copy of the piece of paper, right? That would be pass by value. I'm giving you the information that's stored here, right? The other way that it could be done is you hand them the folder, right? And you don't know what's going to happen to the information in the folder, right? Because you've given it away. And they can modify the contents of that, and everyone else just knows that they're supposed to look at the folder and use whatever values on the inside. That would be pass by reference. Okay? MATLAB is a pass by value system, so whenever I refer to a variable, what MATLAB does is it makes a copy of the value that is stored in that variable and then passes the copy along. Okay? That's good because it's a little bit safer than pass by reference, right? We can see the dangers and how information might get messed with or lost, but it's expensive to do it that way because you end up creating a lot of copies of the same information. All right. Other programming languages and other contexts have reasons to be pass by reference as opposed to pass by value. Okay. And then for those of you who know a little bit more about this already, pointers just make everything worse. Pointers are one of the tools in pass by reference systems. Okay. Now, there are things in MATLAB that behave sort of like pass by reference, and we will discuss those as we get a little bit later in the semester, but unless we are talking about very specific things, the variables in MATLAB have pass by value behavior. Okay? So that's why it works the way that I demonstrated at the beginning of the discussion here. All right, so thank you. Good question. All right, does anybody have any follow-ups, or does that pretty much make sense? Okay. All right. From here, the thing to do, and we'll probably, I'll allow you to do this on your own time this time because I know everyone's in different situations. If I knew that the laptops were all working in here, I would go ahead and ask you to now try to log in and get everything set up. But what I want you to do is, if your account doesn't work or you don't otherwise have access to MATLAB, okay, one of your assignments is to make sure by Friday that you can get into MATLAB. Okay. If you're having trouble, I want emails before the weekend that you're having trouble, not during or after the weekend. Okay. And then, so that'll be my ask for completing this exercise. I'll post a submission link for this. So get access to MATLAB and complete exercise 1 before by Friday. Okay. And then we'll have a little bit more time to do the first homework assignment. But that's what I'd like you to do in that regard. Okay. These questions are short. Basically, it's just making sure that you are typing things in correctly. I want to make sure that there isn't, okay, there's a typo there that I need to fix. Okay, yeah, should be fine. All right, a few things to note. We do real math here, so our trigonometric functions default to radians. That's a joke. All right. Anyway, if you want to use degrees for your trig functions, you need to put a D at the end of the name of the command. All right. I work in radians just because they make more sense to me than degrees do. It's one of those things where they always teach you how to do degrees first, and then at a certain point in at least my mathematical career, it just got to the point where I unlearned most of that. Like, you know about 30, 60, and 90 degrees and 45 degrees, but if it's not one of those numbers, it might as well just be any old number, and radians are easier to work with in general past that point. So anyway, we have the trigonometric commands. Some of the exercises refer to the trigonometric commands. The logarithm is also the real logarithm. Okay. If you type log, what you get is the natural logarithm, not the logarithm base 10. Okay. On your calculators, the log button is the log base 10. In MATLAB, sorry, I'll do an example that's a little bit more obvious. Okay, log 10 is the common logarithm, and if you just type the word log, you get the natural logarithm. At a certain level of mathematics, approaching kind of senior level college mathematics or just in graduate school, they stop the ln nonsense and just start writing log all the time and have that mean the natural logarithm, especially if you're taking the logarithm of complex numbers, which don't do that unless you have to. Complex valued logarithms are not nice. I don't like branch cuts. They're not fun. Anyway, but just keep that in mind. I mostly mean this to be joking. These are things that you might trip over if you didn't see them. Was there a question in the back earlier? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It doesn't specify the compound rate. I will change the exercise to make sure that that's more clear. But yeah, I would in that instance I would count either compound interest or annually compounded interest or continually compounded interest to be correct. Is there any other questions? Okay. I'm getting a lot of like arm movement. I don't know if it's like people are getting stiff or warm or what. I just want to make sure we're okay. All right. The log base 2 is also built into here. but those are the only ones that are built in. Every other type of logarithm you would want to do would require the change of base formula. So log is the natural log. Log 10 is the common logarithm, or the log base 10. The log base 2 is in here. The log base 2 is built in because of binary, and then everything else would need the change of base formula. All right. What else? EXP is the exponential function. So this is e to the first power. So if we do the natural log of the exponential of 1, we get 1. Those functions are inverses of one another. I mentioned the arctangent. Okay, so this will give you an angle in radians, right? For that, this is the part where I have to remember what stuff I want to show off before we get too complicated. It's very easy to kind of go off the deep end. All right, so what's the relevant stuff here? Okay, we've talked about trig functions. We did arithmetic operations, which is kind of the main thrust of this. Exponents are the caret key. Okay, so that should be fine. I think we are well prepared for that. All right. Oh, another thing that I have done is there are some format commands here in MATLAB. If we type this, what this does is it changes the amount of stuff that is displayed to the console. Okay. Most MATLAB sessions, and you can change the default preferences on this, but most of the time things start out in format short just to keep the outputs compact. Okay. If you want to see more decimal places on screen, you can type format long to adjust that. All this does is affect what shows up on the console. It does not affect the numerical accuracy of any of the computations. Okay, MATLAB uses the full floating point precision until you do something to tell it to not do that level of precision. You have to tell it to round off or something. Okay, so these even though these look different, okay, it just rounds to this for the purposes of displaying on screen, but this output and this output are the same. The same number is stored in the computer. It's just a matter of what's put on screen. Okay, I think one of the homework questions asked you to mess around with this, so I wanted to make sure that it was clear. And again, you work in the format that displays the information that is the most helpful to you, right? Where you might want to not have everything on screen is if you're typing complex numbers. Okay, that already takes up more space, and I don't need to see the extra 8 zeros in both the real part and the imaginary part. So I would probably do format short for this and be fine. Okay. By the way, I am demonstrating another trick of the trade here. If you are working with a situation where you have set I to some other value, say 4 in this case, if you type a number in like this, where you do 2 plus 3i, MATLAB knows that you mean to type a complex number, so it will ignore the fact that I has been independently given some other value. Okay, so I can always type in complex numbers by not putting any spaces in between the imaginary part and I. This works if I put a decimal in front of it as well. Okay, if I need to do something like this, I can also do that. If I I need to multiply it by some number, right? or I want to use some saved variable, I can do times 1i, and 1i is always the imaginary unit. Okay, it also works for j. Other programming languages, Python, for instance, use j as the only built-in way to do the imaginary unit. But another thing to play around with. What else can we do? All right, I'm just noodling at this point. Who here knows what the word noodling means? Huh? No, I'm using the music version of the term. Anyway, it means just kind of like playing around on the instrument, improvising, that kind of thing. There's a okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. What? Oh, I haven't posted the assignment yet. For the exercises, I will do that later on. I'll add that to my list of things to make sure it's done tomorrow morning at the latest. But there will be, what I'll do is I'll create a content area over here on the left in Blackboard for exercises and homework. And then the links to those will be there. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about this so that we have this available to us should we need it. Okay. I think I mentioned as one of the things that I just typed in yesterday when I was playing around, or on last lecture when I was playing around with stuff, were random number generation. Okay. And MATLAB actually has several ways to generate random values. Okay. And they all have different meanings. And this is one of the ideas that you need to become familiar with for folks who are going to be doing numerical computations using computers. So let's talk about this and the behaviors of these different types of things. All right. So these are the two commands. All right. Okay. I see that there's a question in the chat about one of the exercises. I will get back to that after this this discussion here. Which one was the ruler? That one. Okay. Stop lecturing for 3 weeks and you forget what the keyboard shortcuts on the tablet do. All right. Okay. So the way that the random numbers work in the rand command are according to what is referred to as a flat distribution. Okay. The idea is that we have numbers between 0 and 1. Okay. And all of these numbers are equally likely. So in the x-axis, we have the value. Okay. And over here, we have the probability. Okay. This graph is known as a probability distribution. The idea is that you have a graph that represents the sets of all probabilities for an event, and if you take the integral of that graph over all space, you get 1, right? Because the probability that something's happened over all possible outcomes is something happened, right? Certainty, right? So this is how this is all set up, okay? All of the numbers are equally likely, and the value on the y-axis is the probability of a particular x value being selected out of our distribution, okay? The normal distribution looks something like that, all right? It's supposed to be symmetric, and it might be narrower towards the middle or flatter than the way that I've drawn it, but it looks something like this. If you are familiar with the shape of a bell curve, that's what that's supposed to be, right? The kind of standard deviation style graph. Okay. The axes mean the same thing. The value is on the x-axis, and the height tells us the probability of any particular thing. And if I had drawn the picture correctly, the area under the curve would be 1. Except for the rand_n command, technically any real number can pop up out of my distribution. Okay. If I get farther away from 0, it become very, 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 very unlikely, but they can still happen. Okay. Now, if we are doing experiments or computations involving random numbers, we need to know what makes sense for the purpose of selecting random numbers in order to test our system or in order to generate results if there's some kind of randomness built into what it is we're doing, right? Does it make sense to do the more physical thing where most of the events are going to be grouped in a narrow band of possibilities and there are occasionally going to be outliers, right? Or do we test in an environment where all possible inputs in a certain range are equally likely? It depends what we're modeling, right? Okay. If we're talking about rolling a dice, okay, we would want to pick specific values, but we would want all those values to be equally likely. Okay. If we're talking about a digital device that's doing something like measuring earthquakes, the possible events are going to be in a narrow band, right? But there might be some outlier events, and we would maybe want to account for that. Okay. If we're setting up some kind of system, we need to be cognizant of what is the more realistic version of the fake or pseudo randomization that we want to add using our computer system. Okay, and that's kind of the purpose of these two different commands. We want to make sure that we're using the appropriate one. Most of the stuff that we might do in this class using randomization is likely to be handled by this, okay, where we just use a flat distribution. But if we're more true to life and doing something that is more in line with physics or trying to represent some more sophisticated physical model, we would maybe want to go this route. Okay. All right. There was a question about one of these problems. Okay. There was a question in the chat asking about the word of the use hypotenuse here. Okay. Just the hypotenuse in this particular meaning just means the third side, right? The one that is not otherwise specified. Okay. So we normally only think about right triangles as having hypotenuses, but that's what it means. It just means the third side of the triangle. Yeah.
So for that, we just plug in 3 for A, 4 for B, and 40 for B.
Yeah, these are again, these are the exercises. These are meant to be doing sitting in class, and in non-pandemic circumstances, I would wander around and make sure that everybody was typing in everything correctly. That's what the purposes of those are. Those are meant to be short and sweet. Okay, and then we can take a peek at the homework. Okay, there's some more stuff going on with the homework. There might be a little bit more research involved in how to use these things. Okay, and I want to, before we run out of time today, show you a useful tool for that, and then allow you to experiment with this tool on your own. Okay, so again, for this, you're going to be making another diary file. There's just going to be more stuff that gets put in the diary than for the exercises. Okay, there are some things that we will let you all type in to see what happens. Okay, you can take 1 divided by 0. One of the things that I haven't talked about yet is MATLAB has 2 special values that come up. INF is a shorthand for infinity. Okay, in MATLAB, what this means is a quantity that MATLAB has detected based on the way that you have input in the values that is increasing without bound. Okay. By the way, for those of you who, I don't know how particular your calculus teachers in the past have been about the idea of infinity, but when as mathematicians we talk about infinity, we mean a quantity that is increasing without bound. Okay, you should always think about infinity in the terms of a limit, right? It's always just something that's growing. All right, it's not a number. Okay, and this thing is not a number. That's what it means. Okay, so it is some nonsense that has occurred. Something that doesn't have mathematical meaning associated with it. Okay, so if you see nans, it means you're doing some bad stuff by dividing by 0 and you get something that's undefined. Okay, but there are some instances where you may type in something that you know is undefined, but MATLAB has some other meaning associated with it, and maybe you try that out and then ask me about it because it doesn't make sense, and I can explain why it does it that way. Okay? Because one of the things that we will discover about MATLAB in general is that there are some shorthands built into it and ways that it does things that are convenient from the perspective of scientific computing applications, but are not technically correct. All right. I will point those things out as they arise. Okay. There's a homework problem that I was alluding to that will demonstrate one of these things. And there are going to be some various other MATLAB shorthands that we use because they make sense, but you have to know that if you wrote that in a math class, you would get the big red no stamped on your paper. Okay, but we allow it to be a programming shorthand here because it's just easier to type this than what the alternative would be. Okay, there's a question in the chat asking about when the first homework assignment is going to be due. I will preliminarily make the due date for that, say Monday night, maybe Tuesday night or something. It'll be early next week to keep us on schedule. All right. I want to make sure that there wasn't something else that I was forgetting to type in. Okay. Take a look. Oh, yes, that's right. Okay. Plenty of stuff to read through here. The last bit is MathWorks is the name of the company that makes MATLAB. If you go to their website, they have a very powerful and useful search bar over here, okay? This search bar allows you to search the MATLAB documentation, okay? So if I do something like type in the name of a built-in MATLAB function, I will get some results, okay? And then this is a documentation page for this command in MATLAB, okay? If I type in some other function name, we talked about the rand function. I click that, it takes me to the documentation page for the rand function, all right? This is what I expect you to reference if there are commands that I refer to that don't make sense, okay? There will be some things that show up in the homework assignments that we haven't talked about in class. The idea is that you take advantage of these resources and learn and read about them and figure out how to put in the inputs to the functions and use them properly, okay? And they're going to, anyway, this is a powerful tool, and this is the kind of thing that you would do outside of the context of this class when you're trying to figure out how to do something. You start typing in the name of, I know that the math word for doing this thing is this, okay? And then you figure out what the MATLAB command is associated with it. Yes? Sorry, what? The exercises will be due on Friday. The homework will be due early next week, either Monday or Tuesday. I haven't decided yet. Okay. So are there any other questions? Seems all right? Okay. So that's where we'll call it for today. All right. Everyone take care. I will get some things posted in Blackboard for you all to take a look at. The exercise links are there. I will post the actual submission links for the exercises and everything so that you have access to those. And then if there's something that I've said that I'm going to do and I have forgotten to do in the next day or so, send me an email and I'll make sure it gets taken care of. All right? Have a good one, everybody. I'll see you next week.